The pink piggy bank landed on the white linen table with a sound that shouldn't have been heard across a crowded restaurant, but it was. The porcelain thud echoed through the grand dining hall like a gunshot. Crystal chandeliers trembled, forks froze midair, conversations died. Because that table belonged to Anderson Rodney. The man in the tailored gray suit didn't flinch. He was used to interruptions, though they usually came from men twice his size carrying briefcases of cash or envelopes sealed with threats, not from a child barely tall enough to see over the tablecloth. Her name was Shirley, 5 years old, blonde hair falling past her shoulders, wearing a simple floral dress that had seen better days. Her small hands clutched the pink ceramic pig like it was the most valuable thing in the world. It was. Behind Anderson, 2 bodyguards moved instantly, massive men in black suits, their hands reaching inside their jackets. But Anderson raised one finger. Just one. They froze like statues. The restaurant held its breath. Shirley's bottom lip trembled. Her eyes wide, innocent, terrified, locked onto the man everyone else was too afraid to look at directly. The man with the intricate black tattoo crawling up his neck like a warning. The man whose name made grown men whisper. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please save my sister." Anderson Rodney had built an empire on knowing exactly what people wanted before they asked. He could read fear, greed, desperation. He'd seen men beg, cry, bargain with their souls. But this? A child offering her life savings? Her most precious possession? This was new. "They took Laura," Shirley continued, pushing the piggy bank closer with trembling fingers. "The bad men. They said Daddy owed them money, but Daddy's not here anymore, and Mama's sick, and Laura's only 12, and I don't have much, but..." She looked at the piggy bank, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Everyone says you're the strongest. Everyone says you can do anything. Please." The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time in 15 years, Anderson Rodney felt something crack inside his chest. Something he thought had died long ago, buried under concrete and blood and money. He stared at the piggy bank, at the small, desperate girl, at the hope shining in her eyes. Hope that saw him not as a monster, but as a hero. And in that moment, in that silent, watching restaurant, Anderson made a decision that would change everything. He reached out and picked up the piggy bank. "What's your sister's full name?" His voice was cold, controlled. But his hand, the hand that had signed death warrants and counted millions, held that plastic pig like it was made of glass. "Laura Rodriguez." The name hit him like a bullet. Rodriguez. No, it couldn't be. Anderson's jaw tightened. Behind his eyes, memories flickered. A warehouse fire, a man shoving him through a doorway, screams, and then silence. "Get out, Anderson! Take care of them if I don't make it!" His hand gripped the piggy bank tighter. "Shirley," he said quietly, and everyone in the restaurant leaned forward without meaning to. "Go sit over there. Order whatever you want, and wait for me." She blinked up at him, confused. You'll help?" Anderson Rodney, the man who had forgotten how to feel, who had built walls around his heart higher than any building in the city, looked down at the 5-year-old girl and did something he hadn't done in years. He nodded. "I'll bring your sister home." The bodyguards exchanged glances. The restaurant began to buzz with whispers, but Anderson was already standing, the piggy bank tucked under his arm, his phone pressed to his ear. "Marcus, I need every contact we have, every favor we're owed, every piece of information on the Rodriguez kidnapping, and I need it 5 minutes ago." Because Anderson Rodney had just remembered something important. Debt. He'd spent his entire life collecting it, but he'd forgotten the one debt he actually owed, and he was about to repay it in blood. Stay with me until the end because this story will leave you speechless. But before we continue, If you believe monsters like Volkov who profit from stolen childhoods deserve to be stopped, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you think a 5-year-old's courage is worth more than a criminal's empire. And comment where you're watching from. Let me know you're not on the side of men who trade children like merchandise. Now, let's see what Anderson does next. Anderson Rodney's world was built on absolutes. Money bought loyalty. Fear bought silence. Power bought everything else. He'd learned these truths young, carved them into his bones until they became scripture. By 38, he'd accumulated more wealth than most men saw in 10 lifetimes, commanded an empire that stretched across 3 states, and wielded influence that made politicians sweat through their expensive suits. But somewhere along the way, in the climb from nothing to everything, he'd lost the ability to feel it. The restaurant, Lumiere, was his favorite precisely because it understood this. No one asked questions. No one stared too long. The staff moved like ghosts, appearing only when summoned, disappearing before gratitude could be expected. The private corner table, always reserved, always waiting. The bodyguards positioned just close enough to be effective, just far enough to allow the illusion of privacy. Even the lighting seemed to know its place, casting shadows that made dangerous men look almost respectable. Anderson sat with his back to the wall. Always the wall. His gray suit tailored to perfection, his white shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the edge of the black tattoo that wrapped around his throat. That tattoo told a story to those who knew how to read it. Each line, each symbol marked a territory claimed, a rival eliminated, a lesson learned in blood. It was a map of violence, inked permanently into his skin as a reminder of what he was capable of. Around him, the restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of the wealthy. Deals being made over Dover sole, secrets traded between courses, affairs beginning in the spaces between dessert and coffee. Anderson heard none of it. He'd stopped listening years ago. His phone buzzed constantly, always did. Numbers scrolling across the screen. Profits, losses, territories, problems that needed solving. He responded to each with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd reduce human interaction to algorithms. This amount here, that consequence there. No hesitation, no second guessing. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford, so he'd simply stopped purchasing it. The wine in his glass was a 1982 Chateau Margaux, $12,000 a bottle. It tasted like nothing. His bodyguards, Victor and Sasha, twins from Moscow who'd followed him for 8 years, stood behind him like twin pillars of violence barely restrained. They were good at their job because they understood the only rule that mattered. Anderson Rodney was untouchable. Anyone who forgot that lesson learned it exactly once. The meal arrived. Wagyu beef, prepared by a chef who'd won 3 Michelin stars and lost his soul somewhere in the kitchen. Anderson cut into it with precision, chewed without tasting, swallowed without satisfaction. It was fuel, protein and calories to keep the machine running, nothing more. He was reaching for his wine when he saw her. A child, blonde hair, floral dress, moving between tables like she was navigating a minefield, which, in a way, she was. Every person in Lumiere knew who sat in that corner. Every person knew better than to approach uninvited. But the girl, she couldn't have been more than 5, walked forward with the terrible determination of someone who had no other choice. The first bodyguard at the entrance should have stopped her. He was looking at his phone. The second checkpoint, a waiter trained to redirect problems, was clearing a nearby table. Even Victor and Sasha, vigilant as hunting dogs, had glanced away for just a moment, conferring about something in rapid Russian. And then she was there, at his table. So small, she had to reach up to place the piggy bank on the white linen. The sound it made, that ceramic thud, cut through everything. Conversation stopped like someone had thrown a switch. Heads turned. In the kitchen, a pot clattered to the floor. Even the pianist in the corner missed a note, his fingers stumbling over keys that had been playing themselves moments before. Because interrupting Anderson Rodney wasn't just rude, it was suicidal. Anderson stared at the piggy bank. Pink, ceramic, shaped like a smiling pig with flowers painted on its sides. Completely absurd sitting there next to his wine glass and his imported beef and his $12,000 evening. Then he looked at the girl. She was shaking, terrified, but she had a run. Her small hands released the piggy bank and clenched into fists at her sides, like she was physically holding herself together through pure will. Tears streaked down her face, leaving clean lines through dust that suggested she'd been crying for a while. Her dress was clean but worn, the kind of hand-me-down that spoke of a family that cared but couldn't quite afford to show it. And her eyes. God, her eyes. Wide and blue, and filled with something Anderson hadn't seen directed at him in years. Not fear, though that was there too. Not greed. Not calculation. Hope. Victor moved first, his hand closing around the girl's thin arm like a vice. "Ukhadi," he growled. "Go, now." But the girl didn't go. She looked past Victor, past Sasha, past every terrifying thing in the room, and locked eyes with Anderson. "Please," she whispered, and the word carried across the silent restaurant like a prayer. "Please, save my sister." Anderson's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. For a moment, just a moment, time did something strange. The restaurant fell away. The bodyguards, the watching crowd, the $12,000 wine, all of it dissolved. And there was only this child, offering everything she had in the desperate hope that a monster might choose to be a hero instead. "The bad men came," she continued, her voice breaking with each word. "They took Laura, my sister. She's only 12, and they said Daddy owed them money, but Daddy's gone, and Mama's sick, and I don't have much, but everyone says you're strong. Everyone says you can do anything." She pushed the piggy back closer with fingers that trembled like leaves in a storm. "I've been saving since I was 3. It's all there, every penny. Please, I'll give you everything. Just bring Laura home." Sasha reached for her other arm, ready to physically remove this interruption from their boss's evening. Anderson watched his hand move, watched the girl flinch but hold her ground, watched the entire scene unfold with the strange clarity of a man watching his own life from outside his body. And then he remembered. Fire, smoke so thick it burnt his lungs. A man, younger, stupider Anderson, trapped under a fallen beam, metal searing through his jacket into the skin beneath. And another man, older, wiser, stronger, lifting that beam with bare hands that blistered and bled, shoving Anderson through a doorway, screaming at him to run, the building collapsing behind him in a roar of timber and flame. "Get out! Anderson, get out! If I don't make it, take care of them. Promise me." Rodriguez. Carlos Rodriguez. The debt Anderson had spent 15 years pretending he'd forgotten. "Stop." His voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. Victor's hand froze. Sasha stepped back. Even the girl stopped trembling for a moment, shocked by the single word from the man everyone feared. Anderson set down his fork with deliberate care. "What's your name?" "Shirley." "Shirley what?" "Shirley Rodriguez." The name settled over the table like snow on a grave. Anderson felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it could move. He looked at the piggy bank, at the girl, at the hope that still, impossibly, shone in her eyes. "Victor, Sasha, get Shirley a table, whatever she wants to eat." He reached out and picked up the piggy bank, feeling the weight of coins shift inside. "And call Marcus. Tell him I need everything on a Laura Rodriguez, age 12, kidnapped recently. Father's name was Carlos." The bodyguard stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. In 8 years, they'd never seen their boss show mercy, never seen him spare a thought for anyone outside his immediate circle of profit and power. "Now," he added, and the word carried enough weight to move mountains. They moved. Shirley stood frozen, tears still streaming, but now mixed with something else. Confusion, disbelief, the terrible, fragile beginning of hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd been right to believe in fairy tales. You'll really help?" Her voice was so small it barely existed. Anderson looked at her, really looked at her and saw Carlos in the shape of her nose, in the determination of her jaw, and the way she stood her ground even when giants loomed over her. 15 years ago, a man had saved his life and asked one thing in return, one promise: take care of them. "I don't make promises I can't keep," Anderson said. It was the closest thing to yes he'd given anyone in a decade. "Sit, eat, don't leave this restaurant until I come back." He stood, the piggy bank tucked under his arm like a briefcase, and walked out of Lumiere with Victor and Sasha flanking him like attack dogs who'd just been reminded what they were trained to do. Behind him, the restaurant erupted into whispers that would become rumors, that would become legends. But Anderson didn't hear them. He was already making calls. The car, a black Mercedes S-Class with bulletproof glass and enough modifications to qualify as a military vehicle, waited at the curb. Anderson slid into the back seat, the piggy bank on his lap, while Victor drove and Sasha rode shotgun, already on the phone barking orders in 3 languages. "Marcus," Anderson said into his own phone, his voice cold enough to freeze water. "Laura Rodriguez, 12 years old, taken 4 days ago from her apartment in the Bronx. Mother's dying of cancer, couldn't pay the medical bills. Father, Carlos Rodriguez, died 15 years ago in a warehouse fire. Left debts. Those debts got transferred to a loan shark named Victor Kozlov. Not our Victor. Different Victor. This one's a bottom feeder. Works for the Sergei Volkov operation. They've been expanding into debt collection and other things." Anderson's jaw tightened. What other things? The pause on the other end told him everything. Trafficking boss. Girls. Young girls. They take them from families who can't pay, sell them to... Location. We're working on it. Volkov moves his merchandise every 48 hours, but we've got ears in his organization. Give me 2 hours. You have 1. Anderson ended the call and stared out the window at the city lights sliding past. New York, his city, built on crime and ambition and the dreams of men who wanted to be kings. He'd conquered it all, claimed his throne, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in expensive Italian leather. And he'd felt nothing. The piggy bank sat on his lap, surprisingly heavy for something filled with coins saved by a 5-year-old over 2 years. With each turn, each bump in the road, the contents shifted. A sound like tiny bells, like a clock counting down, like the weight of a promise made 15 years ago that he tried to forget. Carlos Rodriguez had been different from the others in Anderson's old crew. Quieter, careful. He joined not because he wanted power or money, but because his daughter, his first daughter, Laura's mother, had been sick and the medical bills were crushing him. Anderson had been younger then, still believing that loyalty meant something, that the crew was family, that the money they made would somehow make them better men. Then the fire happened, a warehouse raid gone wrong, rivals, gasoline, matches. Anderson trapped, burning, dying, and Carlos who had a daughter waiting at home, Carlos who had everything to lose, had run back into the flames. The last thing Carlos had said, take care of them. The last thing Anderson had done, run away and try to forget. He told himself Carlos had no family, that the daughter had died too, that the debt had been paid in blood and fire and the ashes of who he used to be. He'd built his empire on that lie, brick by brick, million by million, until the weight of his success had buried the guilt so deep he'd convinced himself it didn't exist. But here, in his lap, was the evidence. Pink ceramic, children's coins, a desperate plea from a 5-year-old who'd somehow found the one man in the city who owed her everything. The car turned onto the FDR drive, heading south toward Anderson's headquarters. Behind them, 2 more cars fell into formation. Backup that was always there, always ready, always waiting for the word to become violence. Anderson picked up the piggy bank and shook it gently. The coins rattled like teeth, like bones, like all the people he'd hurt in the name of profit. Boss? Victor glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes questioning. In 8 years, he'd never seen Anderson show emotion, never seen him care about anything except the bottom line. "Drive faster," Anderson said quietly. "A little girl is counting her savings. She needs to know she made a good investment." The Mercedes accelerated into the night, carrying a man who'd forgotten how to feel, a piggy bank full of hope, and the weight of a debt that had been waiting 15 years to be repaid. Marcus called back in 47 minutes. Anderson has spent every one of them in his penthouse office, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the piggy bank on his desk catching the light from 1,000 buildings below. Behind him, Victor and Sasha maintain their positions by the door, silent as statues, while a dozen more of his men fill the outer rooms waiting for orders that would inevitably come with blood attached. Pier 47, Red Hook, warehouse registered to a shell company owned by Volkov's cousin. They've got 6 girls there right now, including Laura Rodriguez. Marcus's voice was efficient, clinical. He'd learned long ago not to let emotion into information. Security's lighter than usual. Volkov's been getting cocky. 4 guards outside, maybe 6 inside. He'll be there tonight to finalize a sale. Anderson's reflection in the window was a stranger's face, sharp, cold, tattooed, rich. But underneath, somewhere buried beneath years of calculated cruelty, was the young man who'd once believed in friendship, who'd believed Carlos Rodriguez when he'd said loyalty was worth more than money, who'd been wrong about everything except the one person who'd proven it didn't matter. "How many men do we need?" Victor asked from behind him. Anderson turned from the window. His eyes, dark, empty for so long, held something new. Something old, actually. Something he'd buried in ash and smoke 15 years ago and tried to never dig up again. Purpose. "All of them," he said. "And Victor, no unnecessary casualties. We're not there to start a war. We're there to end one." The drive to Red Hook took 32 minutes through late-night traffic. Anderson sat in the back of the Mercedes, the piggy bank on the seat beside him, and thought about Carlos Rodriguez. Really thought about him, for the first time in 15 years. They'd met in prison, both young, both stupid, both serving time for crimes that seemed important at the time and meaningless in hindsight. Carlos had asked one night, lying on the bunk below Anderson's, "You got family?" Anderson had answered one night, which was true enough. His parents were dead or gone or might as well have been. "That's your problem," Carlos had said. "A man without family is a man without purpose. Just surviving isn't the same as living." Anderson had laughed at that, laughed at the idea that purpose came from something as simple as caring about someone else. He'd spent his 20s proving Carlos wrong, building an empire on the principle that caring made you weak, that attachment was a liability, that the only person worth protecting was yourself. Then Carlos had died saving him, and Anderson had spent his 30s proving Carlos right by becoming exactly the kind of man who forgot what living meant. The warehouse district of Red Hook was a graveyard of industrial ambition. Rusted cranes, abandoned shipping containers, buildings that outlived their usefulness and were now waiting to die. Pier 47 sat at the end of a broken road, illuminated by a few struggling streetlights that barely fought back the dark. Anderson's convoy rolled to a stop 3 blocks away. 8 cars, 32 men, enough firepower to level the building if necessary. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was surgical, precise, the kind of operation Anderson had built his reputation on, except this time it wasn't about profit. It was about a promise. 2 teams, Anderson said, climbing out of the Mercedes. He'd changed into tactical black. No suit, no pretense, just the tools of violence he'd spent years pretending he'd evolved beyond. "Victor, take your team through the east entrance. Sasha, west. I want every exit covered, every guard down before they can make a sound. And when you find the girls—" "Gentle," Victor finished. "We know, boss." Anderson nodded. Then he did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He picked up a weapon himself, a Glock 19, modified with a suppressor, cold and heavy and familiar in his hand like greeting an old friend you'd hope to never see again. They moved through the darkness like shadows with intent. Anderson had forgotten how this felt. The focus, the clarity, the way everything unnecessary fell away until there was only the mission, the moment, the next step forward. He'd spent years in boardrooms and restaurants and penthouses, pretending that money was power. But this was power, the ability to move through the world and reshape it with your own hands. The guards outside never saw them coming. Four men, young, underpaid, more interested in their phones than their jobs, dropped silently before they understood what was happening. Victor's team was already inside, clearing rooms with the efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times in a dozen countries. Sasha's team secured the perimeter, cutting phone lines, jamming signals, creating a bubble of isolation that would last exactly as long as they needed. Anderson entered through the main door into a cavernous space that smelled of rust and fear and something worse, the distinct sense of human desperation that no amount of ventilation could remove. Crates stacked to the ceiling, shipping containers converted into makeshift cells, and lights, harsh and fluorescent, revealing exactly what Marcus had promised. Girls, 6 of them, chained to pipes along the far wall, ranging from maybe 10 to 15, wearing clothes that had been clean once, looking up at the sudden invasion with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. And there, third from the left, dark hair, wearing a shirt with a cartoon character Shirley had probably picked out, Laura Rodriguez. She looked like her father, same nose, same determined jaw, same eyes that tried to be brave even when bravery seemed impossible. She was crying, but silently, the way people cry when they've learned that making noise only makes things worse. "Clear," Victor said in Anderson's earpiece. "All hostiles neutralized except me," a voice called from the shadows above. Russian accent, thick and confident and completely unconcerned with the 32 armed men currently occupying his warehouse. "Anderson, Rodney, I wondered when you'd start caring about things that don't make money." Sergei Volkov emerged from a second-floor office, flanked by 2 more guards, all of them holding weapons but not aiming them. Not yet. He was older than Anderson expected, maybe 50, with gray hair and expensive clothes that didn't match the warehouse around him. A businessman playing at being a crime lord, or maybe the other way around. "Let the girls go," Anderson said. His voice echoed through the warehouse, cold and final. Not a request, a statement of what would happen, whether Volkov agreed or not. "You know I can't do that." Volkov descended the stairs slowly, confidently. "They're merchandise, already sold. Money's been transferred. You of all people should understand. Business is business." Anderson raised his weapon, aiming at Volkov's chest. Behind him, 32 more weapons raised in unison. The math was simple. Volkov had 3 men, Anderson had an army. The outcome wasn't in question. But Volkov smiled. "You won't shoot. Not the great Anderson Rodney. Not the man who spent 15 years building a reputation on being better than people like me. More civilized, more controlled." He spread his arms wide. "Go ahead. Prove me wrong. Prove you're just another animal with expensive clothes." And there it was. The test. The moment. The choice between the man Anderson had become and the man Carlos had believed he could be. Anderson lowered his weapon. "You're right. I won't shoot you." He holstered the Glock and stepped forward, unarmed, unafraid. "Because you're not worth the bullet." Volkov's smile faltered. "Then what?" "Victor," Anderson said calmly, "make the calls." Victor already had his phone out. "Done, boss. Every transaction Volkov's made in the last 5 years is now in the hands of every law enforcement agency in the city. Every account frozen, every property seized, every partner notified that he's been marked as a federal informant." Anderson watched the color drain from Volkov's face, watched understanding dawn, watched the man realize that death would have been mercy compared to what was coming. "You can't—" "I already did," Anderson interrupted. "Your empire? Gone. Your money? Gone. Your reputation? Destroyed. And those men standing next to you." He nodded toward Volkov's guards. They're about to receive significantly better job offers. The guards looked at each other, then at Volkov, then at the 32 weapons still aimed in their general direction. Their own weapons lowered, surrendered. One of them actually laughed. "You're finished," Anderson continued, stepping closer until he was face to face with Volkov. "But you're alive. Remember that. Remember that a little girl asked me to be a hero, and I chose to honor that request. If I see you again, if I hear you're still in this business, if I find out you've hurt anyone else, then I'll prove I'm exactly the animal you think I am." He turned his back on Volkov, the ultimate insult, the clearest message, and walked toward the girls chained to the wall. Victor and Sasha were already there, using bolt cutters on the chains, speaking softly, reassuring them that they were safe, that they were going home, that the nightmare was over. Anderson knelt in front of Laura Rodriguez. Up close, she looked even more like Carlos. Same eyes that tried to be brave, same expression that said she'd protect her sister no matter what it cost. "Laura?" She flinched, then nodded. "Your sister sent me." Anderson reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, showing her a photo Victor had taken back at Lumiere. Shirley, sitting at a table, eating ice cream, safe. "Her name's Shirley. She's 5 years old, and she's been very worried about you." Shirley's eyes went wide. Then tears came, real tears, the kind that came from relief so overwhelming it broke through every defense. "Shirley? She's okay?" "She's perfect, and she's waiting for you." Anderson stood and offered his hand. "Let's go home." 6 months later, Anderson's office looked the same. Same windows overlooking the city, same expensive furniture, same view of an empire built on calculated cruelty and strategic violence. But his desk was different. In the center, where most men kept photos or awards or symbols of their success, Anderson kept a pink ceramic piggy bank, empty now. The coins had been returned to Shirley with interest, enough money to pay for her mother's treatment, to move them into a safer apartment, to ensure that Laura could go to college and Shirley could keep buying piggy banks for the next 50 years if she wanted. But the bank itself, that he kept. His most valuable asset, not because of what it had contained, but because of what it represented. The moment a little girl had believed he could be better than he was. The moment he'd chosen to prove her right. Anderson still ran his empire, still made his deals, still commanded fear and respect in equal measure. But now, once a week, he left the office early, drove to the Bronx, had dinner with 2 sisters and their mother, Maria Rodriguez, Carlos's daughter, who looked at Anderson with knowing eyes and never quite said what they both understood, that some debts can only be repaid by becoming the person the dead believed you could be. The piggy bank caught the afternoon light, its pink ceramic glowing like a promise kept. Anderson reached out, touched it gently, and felt the weight of coins that weren't there anymore. The weight of trust, the weight of hope, the weight of a 5-year-old who'd walk past 3 layers of security to hand the monster her life savings and ask him to be a hero. He'd been trying to deserve that trust ever since. Some days he thought he was getting close. Other days he wondered if a man like him could ever really be redeemed. But then his phone would buzz with a text from Shirley. Usually a drawing, sometimes a joke, always signed "Your Friend." And he'd remember that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about choosing a different future. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in colors that almost looked like fire. Anderson watched from his window, the piggy bank on his desk, and thought about Carlos Rodriguez, about promises, about the strange mathematics of debt and grace, about how sometimes the most valuable thing a person can buy is the chance to be better than they were. His phone buzzed. A message from Laura. "Shirley made honor roll. She wanted you to know." Anderson typed back, "Tell her I'm proud of her." And he was. Proud of a 5-year-old who'd believed in fairy tales. Proud of a 12-year-old who survived hell and came out stronger. Proud of himself for finally, after 15 years of running, standing still long enough to remember what it meant to be human. The piggy bank smiled at him from the desk, its painted flowers catching the dying light. Anderson smiled back. Then he closed his laptop, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. He had dinner plans in the Bronx. Some debts, he'd learned, weren't meant to be paid off. They were meant to be honored every day for as long as you drew breath. And that was a payment schedule Anderson Rodney could finally live with. So Anderson chose redemption over revenge. But here's my question for you. Do you believe people like Volkov, the ones who destroy families and treat children as products, deserve the mercy Anderson showed? Or should he have done something more permanent? Hit subscribe if you're against everyone who profits from others' pain. Smash that like button if you believe a pink piggy bank proved more powerful than an entire criminal empire. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know you stand with the Shirleys of this world, not the Volkovs. Your voice matters. Use it. And thank you for watching.